What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another episode of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I am your host, as always, Tony Mango, and joining me, as always, are Robert DeFelice.
Hey.
And Callum Wiggins.
Hello.
Howdy, everybody. What we are doing here is we are doing something that we don't normally do all that much. We've been kind of doing it once a year for the past 3 years or so, which is...
Oh, is it sex? No.
Did not see that coming at all.
Who am I kidding? Once a year, that's a pipe dream.
No, instead what we're doing is wrestling with the past. We usually only do this for the Hall of Fame discussion, but we thankfully were able to get 1 week, it seems, where it's not a pay-per-view. And we didn't really give a whole lot of discussion to the King of the Ring tournament yet, because this King of the Ring tournament happens to fall on a whole Monday night Raw and Tuesday night SmackDown. We're going to have to change that in a little bit. Schedule, as opposed to being a pay-per-view, so no dedicated topics to that revolving around like pay-per-view points or something like that. But we still wanted to talk about it because King of the Ring is important. It is one of the longer running things that WWE had done in the past. They've taken years off, and that's been an issue that we're going to get into a little bit. But we were trying to figure out a good way to approach this topic, and there was a couple different ways that we could have done it. We could have done a Mount Rushmore of the King of the Ring winners, and we might actually just kind of quickly throw that in there on this discussion while we're at it. I was thinking about making this a top rope list where we could have brought that segment back and done the whole reformatting of the way that it's going to go in the future, which is that we had to figure out ranking based off of kind of like the way that the Mount Rushmore is, and we all have to settle on a top 10 and kind of break things down like that. But that would have been a little bit difficult because we're all coming from different angles at the King of the Ring. I have watched mostly around that 90s type of range, and as I've mentioned before, I stopped watching WWE in the 2000 time bracket, I think 2000, 2001, something around that, and skipped from then until 2006. So I've got a big gap in there. Meanwhile, somebody like Callum, that's when he was really getting into things. So Callum's missing, not going into like the early 90 type of range. Rob, what's your perspective of King of the Ring in that regard?
I think this is one of those topics where I've seen most of it, if not all of it, at least I know all of it from 93 onward.
So we're all coming from different angles, which means I think wrestling with the past is the best way to go about this. And the way that we're going to approach this is kind of relaxed. It's just essentially going to be a discussion of the entire King of the Ring tournament, the concept from its beginning all the way up until now, people that have won the tournament, all the other kind of things that we can go along with that. So we invite you to join in the discussion in the comments below. Make sure you're doing that on YouTube. And while you're over there and telling us what you think about King of the Ring and all the other kind of stuff that we're talking about, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done that already. Ring that little bell for notifications. Obviously, if you're on the audio only kind of side of things, like Spotify or Stitcher or iTunes or whatever, then you can't leave a comment. So hop on over to YouTube and take care of it that way. Let's just start things off very general here. King of the Ring. I think that is one of the absolute best titles of anything that WWE has ever done. It has a purpose to it. It's got the alliteration behind it to, like that rhyming of King and Ring. It seems like it's the type of thing that everybody would want to have, and WWE happened to get it. And if it's not my number one favorite thing that they've ever named, it's in my top 5. How do you guys feel about the whole name behind everything?
I think it's one of the few names that holds up, because you look at Survivor Series, a lot of people might not understand that was actually a literal series of matches that were tag teams, and it was just about the elimination aspect. Royal Rumble is one that maybe comes across a little cheesy in 2019, even though it's got all the history behind it. But King of the Ring and SummerSlam, I think, are two really Like, those are perfect wrestling names.
Yeah, the name is pretty incredible. It just the reason why it's so good is just because it's so simple. You're the king of the ring. It's actually just that's it. You wrestle in a ring, and you are essentially the top person in it. Even though you're not the champion or anything along those lines, you still have some stake to claim that you're the best because you beat a load of people to reach it. I mean, my favorite aspect of the King of the Ring is the fact that it is a tournament, and I think that a lot of promotions in the wrestling world nowadays could benefit from having more tournaments in it.
Tournaments are a very easy way to get somebody over and to give yourself lots of content without it getting bothersome. You know, you could do like a series of matches with certain feuds that, I mean, like, let's be honest, WWE stretches things out all the time. And I've even been writing up some stuff for Clash of Champions where I'm catching myself saying, you know what, I feel like Clash of Champions is just like a stepping stone. Like this Randy Orton and Kofi Kingston thing, I feel like their goal at SummerSlam was, well, we got SummerSlam, then we got to get through Clash of Champions, and we'll wrap this up at Hell in a Cell. And this Roman Reigns thing, it's like, well, we got Eric Rowan, we'll put him out there, but we'll do the Daniel Bryan thing at Hell in a Cell. It's all stepping stone kind of stretching out material and dragging things out. Whereas this King of the Ring tournament, I mean, they've changed the format, and we'll get into that discussion, but they're doing this over the course of a month, and I feel like there's nothing dragging on about it.
No, I think this tournament's been incredibly successful so far. It's gotten people over, it's produced a lot of really good matches, which takes up time, and it means that they don't have to come up with a lot of convoluted storylines about cucking Mike Kanellis or something like that.
Yeah, well, first of all, that fell off the face of the earth, didn't it? But I think this King of the Ring has been done very successfully. In the past, they've done it as, oh, it's a SmackDown exclusive tournament, or, you know, it'll be a one-night episode of Raw. But this format, where you're stretching it out between both of the shows, and you're building towards the finals at the pay-per-view, I think it's maybe the most successful format since they dropped the pay-per-view itself.
Well, let's get into that whole discussion, because that's something that I've heard some people positive and some people negative about. We've had a couple different incarnations of the King of the Ring in the past, and this goes back to 1985 with the original winner, Don Morocco, and we'll break down the winners later too. We've had instances where it's been one show, like one house show, one pay-per-view, and they've kind of only had like a smaller tournament. Maybe it's like 8 people is when they start off with, and you kind of go along with that. That used to be kind of the standard. They would do the King of the Ring would be, okay, we're doing this year. It's 1994's King of the Ring, and we're going to have, I brought up 1994, so why don't I just look at that list while I'm at it. So that one's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 16 people. And those 16 people go on throughout the whole entire night, and they run into situations where they try to do like double countouts, and they try to make really quick pins and stuff just to kind of get through the card. You might have a title defense, you might have like the Intercontinental Champion might be defending his belt, whatever the case may be. And a lot of people really, really loved that. I used to really love that because it had this feel of like, man, you got to go through a whole tournament in one day, and that's going to be real rough. You know, this person got injured in round 2. How are they going to make it into the finals? But then we've had where it's been a 3-hour episode of Monday Night Raw, and I hated that. Yet now the current incarnation is you have 1 or 2 matches a week, and I think that that's oddly better than having it on a 3-hour episode of Raw. At the same time, I still like the one night type of thing. How you guys feeling about all that? I mean, Rob, you just said that you think that this is one of the best, but compared to the other ones, you positives, negatives?
Compared to the idea of at least doing the Elite 8, if you will, for a one-night tournament, I don't know. I might prefer the pay-per-view format a little more, just because I think it's an easier way to get through a pay-per-view event without having to, like Callum said, you know, but make a bunch of convoluted stories about not being able to bang your wife.
I think conceptually the one night's approach is the best, just due to the fact that it makes it feel like the person who wins it has gone through an Iron Man type process to win it. They've had to wrestle 3-4 times in the same night in order to claim the top title. But I think nowadays there's too much evidence of the law of diminishing returns when people come back out for their second or third match of the night. There's too much like, the first time they come out, it's pretty big pop. Second time they come out, pop is less. Third time, they're pretty much silent because they've seen this guy wrestle twice already. And especially nowadays, I don't want to say like especially nowadays, but because what they did previously in like the 80s and 90s was a bit more of a limited moveset. Nowadays, you kind of see these people and they do the same stuff, and it's all convoluted along the lines, but it's still the same stuff. And you get bored of it over time. And I think nowadays there's so much of a lack of attention span that you can't do it in one night and have the same positive effects as stretching out over a couple of weeks or a month.
Well, it's also a completely different scenario where back in the day, back in the 90s in particular, they didn't have anywhere near as big of a roster. So, excuse me. I mean, I have that 1994 one up. There is 16 people in the tournament, but 8 of them got eliminated through TV. So who do you really incorporate onto your pay-per-view cards? You have to put the biggest names possible, but you also don't want to skip out on people. And it's funny enough, you look at this list of just the 94 one, their 8 people that they chose was Razor Ramon, Bam Bam Bigelow, IRS, Mabel, Owen Hart, Tatanka, the 1-2-3 Kid, and Jeff Jarrett. So they missed out on some decent names, Lex Luger, Crush, Quang, Doink the Clown. But in WWE in 2019, we've got people where they could be a potentially big name and they can't even make it into the Royal Rumble. The Royal Rumble's got 30 people and you still don't find enough room for them between that and title matches and everything. And there's still people that are left off the card. It would be impossible to do an 8-man tournament on a pay-per-view in 2019, have all of those matches carry on and miss out on, all the other people on the roster and not get a little bit tiresome. Because we have 16 people in this tournament as it is, and Andrade and Kevin Owens and all these people that have been eliminated so far, they just wouldn't be a part of the mix. And I feel like people wouldn't like that all that much. They'd get tired of the idea of, well, I don't want to watch Baron Corbin wrestle 3 times in the same card. Where is so-and-so? Where's so-and-so? I don't think you can do it now.
Yeah, I might agree with that.
I think that this whole TV thing is the only way that you can pull it off in 2019. And for that matter, I mean, that goes back a couple years ago. I don't think that they would have been able to necessarily pull it off in 2015 either.
I'm looking at one in particular. I'm looking at King of the Ring 2000 because, as far as I can recall, and I'm just double checking. So yes, that's it had 32 participants to start with. So I think it's the biggest one in history. And so the first 2 TV rounds were dealt with on TV, and then they did from the quarterfinals onwards on pay-per-view. And I'm just looking across all of them. Not a single one of those matches went over 10 minutes in length.
Wow. Not even the TV ones?
That's so wild.
No, none of the TV ones. The one that came closest was a quarterfinal match between Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho, which went 9 minutes 50 seconds. So basically 10 minutes, but the rest of them, like, you're seeing a lot of 1 minute, 2 minutes. I mean, to be fair, that was the Attitude Era model. TV matches going about 3 or 4 minutes because we have to devote like 15 minutes to the Steve Austin or Triple H promo that's coming out or whatever. That was very much a time where matches would be done in a blink of an eye, and you have to devote more time to the angles or the backstage or something along those lines.
Whereas, for instance, I'm looking at the 2015 one right now. They didn't try at all on that one. That one started off with the quarterfinals on Raw being just 8 people. And that's one of them's a DQ, after 12 minutes and 29 seconds. One of them's 3 minute and 47-second pin. Then you got some 8-minute pin. You got a 10-minute pin, whatever like that. But then they did these things on the WWE Network. And I think that they had done that as like a special. Like, it's really
The
only 3
finals
matches.
was a special, which was weird.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
semi-finals, the final. Yeah, they did that as a like a 2-hour event on the WWE Network. I think it was after the Raw. I think it was the day after even.
It was like on a Wednesday or something. Like,
Yeah, it was either the day after or a couple of days after that episode of Raw. So they did all the quarterfinals, and then the very next day or the day after, they were putting on this network special.
That was one of their like test runs of, can we do extra little things and stuff, and that just went completely out of my memory as being anything that would be memorable. And it's got some decent people in it. I mean, we got Bad News Barrett, we got Dolph Ziggler, we got Sheamus, Dean Ambrose was in it. So it's not that there was just like a bunch of no names like Skip and Zip or something, but it's just that is not the best format for this. I think that this whole spreading it out over the next bunch of weeks and then having the final at the tournament on a pay-per-view gives that something special. And that kind of coincides a little bit with the Mae Young Classic. And this is another whole discussion, and we might not get too deep into this, but this year in particular, I've heard a lot of people being like, why isn't there a Queen of the Ring? One of them being, it just doesn't have the same ring to it, quite literally. Like, King of the Ring, Queen of the Ring, it doesn't rhyme. So that's one thing. That wouldn't be the end of the whole, well, that means we can never have one. But we do have the Mae Young Classic, and that kind of acts like Queen of the Ring. We don't get it. We haven't gotten it so far, at least this year. But that's sort of the de facto Queen of the Ring tournament, in a way. Isn't it?
I think that the Mae Young Classic and Evolution and the girls getting to Main Event Mania, everything that they've done this year is enough to say, all right, I don't think we need a coinciding Queen of the Ring to go with the King of the Ring tournament. I get that everybody wants to see the women shine at all cost, but I don't think it was necessary here. Maybe, next year they can alternate and not do a King of the Ring, but do a Queen of the Ring.
Yeah, I agree with the idea that potentially they could do a Queen of the Ring afterwards. I'm not so much on board with the idea of, well, they've had enough. Essentially, I think there's never enough. They can have as much or as little as they want, essentially, in the same way that the men get as much or as little as they want. But if they were going to do a Queen of the Ring, I wouldn't say do it concurrently, but I would be fine if they decided, okay, not going to do a King of the Ring next year, we'll do a Queen of the Ring instead. Because the Mae Young Classic does have that same connotations, but it's not for people on the main roster.
Yeah, that's true.
Which are really the people you should be highlighting above anyone else. Like, it's great to get a lot of people coming in from all over the independent circuit and having them put on these great tournament matches where they'll maybe move on to NXT, or we may never see them again. They may go to AEW or whoever else, Ring of Honor, whatever. But the idea of a Queen of the Ring would be to promote someone on your, like, fully committed to your main roster and pushing them further on. But it doesn't really matter if it doesn't have any meaning to it anyway. Like, the winner needs to feel like it has some sort of significance to it.
If they did do a Queen of the Ring, it would have to be the main roster, more so than the Mae Young Classic does spotlight people that are from like outside of the company and everything, so that changes things up. But I think that another issue that comes along with that is, like, the Mae Young Classic last year, they had the final take place at Evolution. And that's kind of the way that they're doing this with Clash of Champions here. And, I mean, Clash of Champions is already getting completely filled up as it is, and we still have missing matches on the card. They wouldn't have been able to do Queen of the Ring at the same time. It would have been a little bit too much of the concept. People would have gotten a little bit tired of it, because it would have been like, oh my god, all we're doing for the whole August through September is just King and Queen of the Ring tournament matches, and that's another match onto the card for Clash of Champions. So I think that anybody complaining about that, they got to look at like the overall perspective. But I'm totally up for a Queen of the Ring tournament in the future. I think that that's got some major potential behind it. Obviously, if that were to happen, we'd obviously break down, like, who are the potential people, and all the stuff that goes along with that. But I dig this this setup with the Clash of Champions thing, and if I were to put this King of the Ring thing on any card in particular, I think Clash of Champions makes a lot of sense for it. It's not technically a championship, but it sort of is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the idea of two contenders battling for a prize, which I'm fine with being on the Clash of Champions, even if no title was at stake.
It's like the next best thing to a title. And in a lot of ways, it's more important than some titles. I mean, whoever wins King of the Ring is going to be in a much better position than 24/7 champion, that's for sure.
You don't know that. I think R-Truth is doing quite well for himself right now.
I don't know, it depends. He might not even be the champion
would
right
you
now.
would you rather be R-Truth now or Wade Barrett coming out in that robe in like 2015?
Well, Bad News Barrett never should have won that. Let's be honest.
Well, I think it should have been Sheamus, but he already won it before, so they don't want to do it again.
Yeah, and that did a lot of good for him as well. I think we need to just bring up the fact that prior to this tournament, the last few King of the Rings really did nothing for nobody.
Well, I want to go further back then and say, rarely ever has King of the Ring been the catalyst for somebody's major monster push. It just so happens that a lot of the winners of the past went on to do great things.
Well, they do make it a point, especially they've been doing this the past couple of weeks, being like, so many different Hall of Famers have been King of the Ring, and so many that aren't in the Hall of Fame have been King of the Ring. And it's something that, it's like that whole discussion of, does the title make the champion, or does the champion make the title?
I know there's enough of an argument to be made that being King of the Ring is the prize itself, and it shouldn't have any connotations towards it. But then my argument would be, well, why doesn't it feel that special? Well, it has. Well, at least in the last few, like more recent ones in the 2010s, it hasn't felt special at all. It just feels like a gimmick.
Yeah, in some ways, it is just a gimmick.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, we've had people in the past that they've won it, and it's immediately become absolutely nothing.
Oh yeah, in many ways, the WWE Championship is a gimmick when you put it on someone like Jinder Mahal or whatever. But
yeah, that's true.
It's just a case of you want to make it feel like it's relevant, and at the moment it feels like it's relevant because it feels like a bunch of guys going like balls to the wall to try and win it, which makes it feel significant.
What if the process behind this is, if you look at the way that they've staggered these tournaments over the years, this is one of the most inconsistent things. Sometimes it's a big deal, and sometimes it just flat out goes away for years at a time. And very quickly, just to give everybody a breakdown of how that has worked out, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, they took a year off with 90, and we had one in 91. They took another year off, didn't do one in 92. They did one in 93, and they carried that on from 93 all the way up until 2002. And then they skipped 2004, 2005. They also skipped 2007. They skipped 2009. They skipped all the way from 2010 all the way to 2015, and then they skipped all the way from 2015 to 2019. So it seems like WWE can only really commit to the King of the Ring tournament, I don't know, once every 4 years at this point. And even back when they were doing it quite a bit, they were only doing it 2-3 years at a time sometimes, and then being like, all right, you know, we're sick of this, we're going to take 5 years off, or, you know, like that kind of thing. Maybe they just get sick and tired of the gimmick. Maybe
I think
it's a matter of them missing it, and then they bring it back, and then they run it into the ground, and then they go, oh, we need to take some time off. Kind of like the Slammy Awards a little bit, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, for starters, the King of the Ring tournament was a gimmick for a house show because back in the day they would do double shots where, like, you know, there would be two house shows kind of in the same area. So one might get Hulk Hogan defending the WWF Championship against Andre, and the other one might get the King of the Ring tournament. It was a gimmick to kind of boost the house show. The reason they take years off, like, for example, there's no King of the Ring in 90 because Macho Man was doing the Macho King gimmick, because for a while, the King of the WWF was almost defended like a championship, and 1990 was a year that was very prevalent. So that's why they took a year off in 90. Same thing with 2007, because they still had Booker doing the King Booker gimmick. With the years in between from 90 to 93, I think 91 saw Brett just win a tournament just to kind of get over the fact that Brett is a good wrestler. They would do it again on pay-per-view a couple years later. And I think the reason WWF doesn't commit, or WWE now doesn't commit, is because they get very bored with ideas. Like they're just like, oh well, we've done that enough. I want to do the wild card rule now, or just whatever gimmick floats into their brain.
I think it's maybe more simple than that. I think Vince McMahon doesn't like tournaments.
We have heard that before, yeah.
Oh, which is a wild thing to me, because it's, again, as we mentioned in the beginning, it's great content, it's easy content, and you showcase so many of your guys. I don't know why Vince doesn't like a good tournament.
I think this is a recent thing, because WWE used to live and die by tournaments. In the we'd talk about like WrestleMania 4 is a big tournament, and there was the Deadly Games thing from Survivor Series 98 is a show dedicated to a huge tournament. So I think and this may be like delving too much into it, and like I don't know for certain, so this is just wild speculation. I think it's a Pat Patterson thing, in that he was one of the main like voices in creative at that point in time, like throughout that entire length of time. And you saw things like the Royal Rumble and more tournaments and stuff, which essentially was ranking people. And then I don't want to say as soon as he goes, but pretty soon after he goes, it becomes less and less frequent. So I think that there was something previously that was motivating Vince to do a lot of tournaments, or the creative process was gearing up towards doing more tournaments, and in the last 10 years or so that's disappeared.
Yeah, it's weird that, like, I can totally see that being the case, because Pat Patterson seems to be one of those big driving motivators towards the idea of, like, let's do something fun. It's kind of like...
he won his only Intercontinental Championship in a tournament which didn't even exist.
It didn't even exist.
Rio de Janeiro. He's the creator of the Royal Rumble, and he's, all about the Gaga, as Bruce Pritchard says all the time. So I could see that being the case, where he would be like, why don't we have a King of the Ring tournament? That'll make this person get over and whatever. And some other writers that maybe aren't even necessarily in the pro wrestling business to begin with, or they're just the type that are more focused on these other side project kind of things that some of us like and some of us dislike about pro wrestling, that they would just forget about that. And it's so crazy, because it's like, it really just does boil down to a friggin' tournament. It's not hard. The most difficult thing out of this whole thing, I think, is creating the throne and the crown and the scepter. It's not the booking of a tournament. The tournament's easy. We have Cruiserweight the Classic stuff. We've gotten, the tournament that helps determine the number one contender. That's easy. You would think that they would do this every year almost, or something. It has to be the matter of they don't like the King of the Ring shtick.
Maybe it feels a little passe for them.
Also, though, at least in the more recent incarnations, the guy that won the King of the Ring didn't get over. So it proved unsuccessful.
Well, let's talk about that, because our, we are the types of people that will go back and will watch older events. And if you're interested in going back in time and checking out some different things in the past, 2001 A Space Odyssey. I always want to call it that. Oh my god, 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey.
It's like we stole it from something.
We do record it in space. You don't know that.
That is something that you should be checking back and listening to those past couple of podcasts on that Callum and Rob have been doing. We go through and we do historical references, and we'll watch old events and stuff. Whereas a younger fan might not necessarily do that. And if you look from the past 9 years, we only have 2 King of the Rings. We have one in 2010, which was Sheamus, and one in 2015, which was Bad News Barrett. Those didn't work out all that well. Bad News Barrett never should have won King of the Ring because his gimmick was already over. He was Bad News Barrett. He would get on that podium. He would say, "I'm afraid I've got some bad news." People would fucking laugh. And he would say some kind of joke or whatever it was. And that would be the end of it. And WWE, for some reason, decided, no, he's got to be King Barrett. And what did he do after that? He fucking left the company. Pointless, the whole King Barrett thing. I can only think of one match that he had that they gave him a little bit of a focal point, and that was that Stephen Amell match, which that wasn't because of King Barrett. He was just somebody to slot in there.
Are you disrespecting the name of the League of Nations?
Yes.
Okay.
I liked the League of Nations for what it was. I'll have to admit that, but I mean that did not work out.
I think the issue with King of the Ring is when they try to get it over, like, but he's got to be a king now, and he's got to wear the crown, and that's only worked for a handful of guys. One being Harley, one being Macho, and the other, in my opinion, being King Haku. But because, like, Owen, I love Owen Hart. Owen Hart, if we were going to do a Mount Rushmore of King of the Ring, I think unanimously Owen Hart would be on the list. And he wore that name, the King of Hearts, so perfectly, but he didn't come out with a crown every week.
Well, King Booker was incredibly successful in that gimmick.
What did I say? Haku? Sorry, Haku. I'm going to bump you for Booker, because I totally forgot about King Booker, and he nailed that gimmick.
I think that there is an over-reliance of putting the gimmick onto it. I think it works for the right person. Like Rob said, there's plenty of good examples of it. But Sheamus coming on with a fawn-based crown and a green robe, that, like, he was a guy who's already been a WWE champion by the time that he'd won King of the Ring. It's like, okay, now he's just a comedy gimmick character. A guy that's already won the WWE Championship twice. You've already pushed towards the main event. Like, he doesn't need to have this garb associated with him now.
Well, I think they were trying something different. See, I can kind of forgive the Sheamus one more than the Wade Barrett thing, because Sheamus, they tried something new with it. It looked different. I think, and here's another thing, I think if Game of Thrones was popular at the time, that might have gotten a little more over, just because you could have incorporated certain aspects of that. But then I believe the only thing I can think of when I think of King Sheamus is Triple H just fucking ran right through him and pedigreed him through a table for no good goddamn reason.
There's always a good reason when it's Triple H.
No, what? Ironically enough, it was to get over that asterisk feud with The Undertaker.
Yeah, I just think that some of the previous ones where they felt like there was more at stake to them, it worked a little bit better. I mean, the ones that I lean towards in terms of who's the best King of the Rings, the ones that use King of the Ring to actually get something out of it. Which is why you turn to people like, well, Randy Savage, because that became his gimmick, and that was such a well-presented character. And then you look at someone like Brock Lesnar, who was fresh into the company by the time that he won the King of the Ring, and he used that to propel himself to become the youngest WWE champion in history.
See, and that was cool, because 2002 established the King of the Ring will get a championship match at SummerSlam. So that you didn't have to wear a stupid scepter or carry a stupid scepter and wear a stupid robe, because it was like, I'm King of the Ring and I'm going to SummerSlam.
Now, I don't know. See, I'm of two opinions about that whole thing. I think that when you've got somebody who has a built-in title shot, that works really well and it gives it a purpose, but it also kind of disregards the King of the Ring to a certain extent. Like, the King of the Ring can exist on its own as being good enough.
I'm not
think
saying that it can't, but
not saying that it can't. It's just you have to do it properly then after that point. And they've proven, especially with more recent incarnations of it, that they can't have it stand on its own merits, or they're not good at making it stand on its own merits. And so they do it, the gimmick dies, and then they come back to it 3 or 4 years later and try the exact same thing again.
I think that one of the issues with that, though, is if you give somebody a title shot, for instance, and they don't win the title, then they don't seem like they're as big of a deal. And if they win the title, which they haven't done in the past like that, then they have that focal point is on the championship and not on the King of the Ring anymore.
well, they did do that in the past, and it was Brock Lesnar, and it basically eradicated the King of the Ring idea because the focal point became Lesnar's the youngest champion. But again, I think that's okay. It doesn't always need to be, okay, well, Hunter S. Helmsley's King of the Ring, and he's gonna wear this crown and this robe. It's just, okay, this is the guy to watch. Like, for example, the guys in this tournament, I don't know if it will do anything for Chad Gable, except saying, okay, this was a nice showcase for Chad Gable. With Corbin, who I feel comfortable saying I think will win, I think it's sink or swim. They're either going to make it so nauseating with that crown that it becomes, this is a great gimmick, and it'll be like a Macho Man, or it'll be Wade Barrett, but worse, because Barrett was more entertaining.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I kind of disagree with the assessment that if the guy who wins the tournament and was to get a title shot and doesn't win it, it'd feel like it was pointless. I think, and I don't just like interject a load of New Japan stuff into a WWE retrospective, but New Japan hosts whole tournaments very much annually. You have the G1 Climax, you have New Japan Cup, you have Best of Super Juniors, stuff along those lines. I don't say it's rare, but it's not exactly evergreen that the person who wins those tournaments wins the titles. But by actually just being in the tournament and establishing themselves in that way, that is enough to get them over. The winning the title side of things is, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's not the important thing. It's being able to get there in the first place, and then being able to have that match with the champion afterwards. So I think there's still scope to think that the winner of the King of the Ring should get something in return for winning it beyond just being King of the Ring, because they're still going to be King of the Ring whether they win, lose, or draw that match. And they can continue doing that. They continue to make it a big deal beyond that point, but they should have something of like tangible need to win that tournament. Like, why are these people going at it just to win a crown, essentially?
It all depends on how they follow it up, because if you set them up as being, I'm going to toss this name out there because, of course, we're going to talk about each individual person, but this one recently came to my mind because Rob was playing the video in the background. But Mabel wins in 1995, and it seems weird, and in retrospect it was weird and all that, but they basically gave him the King of the Ring to set him up as a challenger for Diesel, and Diesel beats him and whatever, and then King Mabel just never reaches that height ever again.
Well, he dominated like that. He was a good heel for that year, and I think it's a weird isolated year because nobody who main evented in 95 mattered by the midway through 96. So I think it's an instance of they put the crown on this guy. They got him over. He was over to an extent. It's just it didn't have the staying power.
Meanwhile, that's June 25th, 1995. June 23rd, 1996, you give it to Stone Cold Steve Austin. He completely disregards the King thing, and he becomes arguably the biggest star since Hulk Hogan, if not even bigger to a certain extent. And that could just be a matter of, well, he's Austin compared to Mabel. Of course he was going to get to that level. Or it could be, well, maybe they didn't give him the King thing. Or it could be, well, maybe they stuck with him, and that's the difference. And somebody like a Bad News Barrett, I feel like he could have always won that world title, but I never felt like King Barrett was going towards that championship. I felt like Nexus Barrett had a chance, and Bad News Barrett probably wouldn't, but they could have gone somewhere with it. Once he won that King of the Ring and he was King Barrett, I'm like, all right, this is just something that's going to, fill up his mid-card time. And that shouldn't be the case, King Sheamus, he had already won the title, so there wasn't anywhere for him to go in the future. And you go back a little bit further, 2008, William Regal was king. Now, that's an interesting story. A lot of people in that time, they thought King William Regal was heading towards a world title. You guys were watching back then. How were you feeling?
He was poised. Well, Calum, do you want to take this?
Oh, you can go ahead.
He was poised to be the biggest villain on Monday Night Raw. He was the GM prior to entering the King of the Ring. Then he became the GM and the King, and he was doing a whole power-hungry gimmick, which was going to set him up for a match with Triple H, I believe, at Night of Champions. And it never prospered because he ended up getting suspended for a wellness violation, but he was poised to have the biggest run of his career.
Yeah, that pretty much covers it all in a nutshell. It's just he was being portrayed as a huge villain. He was the top villain on Monday Night Raw. I fully believe he would have won the WWE Championship if he had been able to avoid the wellness violation. But I think there's a point where in one of Regal's last promos as a wrestler, when he's wrestling Cesaro on NXT, he kind of alludes to his King of the Ring tournament by saying that he never achieved what he wanted most, which was to be the world champion. But he says that it's his fault. That was his fault. And I think that's an allusion to the fact that this was an opportunity to do it, and he, for all intents and purposes, messed it up for himself.
Came so close. Because when they got him back, didn't he get paired with Layla and do the King Regal gimmick?
Yeah, they gave him the King Regal gimmick, and they had him immediately end Santino Marella's honky meter in a Continental Championship reign. As soon as he came back. Yeah, and that was an amazing gimmick. And they first of all, they end Regal's pursuit of the championship because of the wellness violation, and then they bring him back immediately and end this honky meter thing, which is actually getting a lot of traction and being a very entertaining part of the segment. I think it was only like 8 weeks in to, I guess, the 100-odd weeks that Santino would have
64 weeks. It was 64 weeks, and they should have let the honkometer go. That's a different podcast I hope we get to one day. But King Regal really could have been something great. But in that same vein, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the entire fucking thing is a butterfly effect situation. Because you take one iota of fate out of any of that, and nothing happens the way it does. If Triple H doesn't do the curtain call, it's Triple H, and Triple H goes on to face Shawn Michaels at either SummerSlam or Mind Games. Even if you leave that piece in there, if Austin doesn't get kicked in the mouth by Mark Marrow and go away, he doesn't have that rush promo where Doc Hendricks just goes, well, Jake said something religious. Okay, got it, religion, Austin 3:16, go. If you take any of that away, Stone Cold Steve Austin doesn't become who he became. But to what Tony said, they followed through. And I think that is a key. They followed through with what people were saying because they got to the building the next night, and Austin 3:16 signs were everywhere.
And I mean, the wellness policy thing, obviously, that was not a part of WWE's plans for William Regal, because that's never the plan. It's never like, we're going to give you the King of the Ring and we're going to set you up for a world title, and then how about you do some drugs? It's not how things work out. But it does kind of call into question, who was the champion at the time?
Triple H.
In 2008?
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I don't know if he would have been able to beat him. That was firmly in
Triple
that
H
era.
would have completely put Regal over. He would have won it back the next month, but he would have completely put Regal over for the 1 month.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind, because Triple H and William Regal go way back.
Yeah.
Triple H sees William Regal as like a mentor figure.
It's tough though because that's during that era where he reveres Regal, and that's no question. I mean, you can see the way that they interact with NXT, but that was in that era where it was like, well, we got to give the title to Triple H so he can lose it to Orton, so we can give it back so he can, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, it would just be a case of Regal would hold the title for 1 or 2 months, and then he'd drop it back to Triple H. Triple H would be a 14 or 15-time world champion now. Then.
But the case being, he would have definitely dropped that belt. And 2008 was actually not the Orton year. That was the year of Jeff Hardy's going to get 15 shots at this thing until he inevitably gets it and then does some drugs. I don't know. I think Regal would have been a great King of the Ring world champion. And he was the GM. So, like, we've never even seen that even with Corbin, where, all right, so the guy in power is also the world champion. We've never seen that fully play itself out, so that would have been unique.
Yeah, that would have been fun, at the very least, to see like how you could have General Manager King William Regal, WWE Champion. That would have been a lot at the same time.
I mean, we've technically seen it before when Triple H was world champion and they had the Helmsley McMahon regime, whatever the McMahon.
But this would have been done so much better because Regal is a better character.
And he would have been king too. I mean, Triple H wasn't king of the ring at that time.
No, he didn't need to be. Because King of the Ring at that point in time was Billy Gunn.
Yeah. So that's... So you brought up this idea, and this is a random kind of topic, but before we start going individually for each different type of person and stuff like that, I want to toss this out there. William Regal had Layla by his side. We've had plenty of other people by the side of the King of the Ring. Queen Charmel was one of them. Sir Mo for Mabel. Finley had been a part of the Royal Court.
Finley and Regal, weren't they like his knights or something?
Yeah, it was the King's Court, yeah.
The King's Court, yeah. I'm sure I'm blanking on plenty of other ones.
Well, Sherry Martel.
Yeah, Sensational Queen.
Yes, yeah, Sherry. That is also something that you don't even have to necessarily win King of the Ring to be able to get a boost, because you could just be somebody who's associated with the King of the Ring, and that gives you much more purpose. And Finley was never like the top of the card type of thing, but he got a lot of stuff here and there, just random spurts of like United States title stuff or, here and there. I think that being associated with Booker T helped him out quite a bit. It clearly was like the best thing that friggin' Sir Mo ever had done and all that. This year, we don't know who's going to win, but all the people that are left, they don't really have anybody that would be by their side. You'd have to bring somebody else into the mix. You think that that's kind of passé, or could they pull that off again?
I don't think that's passé at all. I think that's one of the best aspects of the King of the Ring that you can bring in. I don't know who's as insufferable in the fans' eyes as Baron Corbin, but if you get like the right person to be his queen, that would elevate the game to the next level. Oh, Lacey Evans.
It'd have to be Lacey Evans.
That would be fantastic. Or even, Dana Brooke. I think you turn Dana Brooke heel and you put her alongside Corbin, that's a good angle. And even if you get like they're perfect at this, so I'll just throw this out there. The B team, with these little court jesters, like, perfect.
Yeah, they haven't had a court jester, have they?
They should have. They had Drink the Clown all these years. I don't know why they never.
Yeah, what the hell? How did they not do that?
Oh, maybe they just thought that was too corny for mid-90s WWE.
Yeah, I mean, Sir Mo was a much better idea than Court Jester Mo.
They never had a jester character, so it's like they could have had they've had plumbers and they've had like garbage men and stuff like that, but
Repo Man and all that.
They had to get like Jimmy Jester into the mix, or
that guy Phantasmo. He could have been the Court Jester.
Well, I mean, you don't have to have like that kind of a gimmick to be the Court Jester. You could just be.
I think Drake Maverick would be great at that character.
That's exactly the name I was about to say, like a Drake Maverick type, where it's just like, you're my Court Jester, make me fucking laugh, like Dance Monkey, that kind of thing. And you could only do that with a heel, though. That's the thing. Like, there's no babyface King of the Ring that can really work as being like, I've got the King's Court. You know, King Ricochet, which is his Twitter account. He's not going to have this queen who helps him win matches and stuff. It just doesn't work.
So, just rearranging some puzzle pieces there. If you have, like, if EC3 were in the tournament and he were to win it and have Mandy as his queen and Maverick as the jester, I think that'd be fucking perfect.
Yeah.
Fantasy
I'd have
booking
been
101,
so up for
but
that.
like, yeah, that's a good idea.
It would mean they would have to push EC3 though, so that's
Yeah.
not going to happen.
It should, but yeah. Who knows? NXT. It's kind of hope that that's the case. Even that discussion, though, the idea of heel and babyface King of the Rings. Kings of the Ring. King of the Rings? Kings of the Ring?
Kings of the Ring.
Kings of the Rings? I don't know. Sting in the Ring and the King of the Ring. I think that King of the Ring very rarely works as a babyface thing.
Correct.
It doesn't. I don't know why. It should work more effectively than it does. Because essentially the idea of the King of the Ring is you go through loads of other people to win. It should really be a babyface tournament to win. It's not like Money in the Bank where you can just win. All you have to do is win one match. You can sneak in through the back door to win it. It's one where realistically you've had to have gone through 3 or 4 people to win it. But
Well, out of our list that we've seen of people King of the Ring, who have been baby faces and stuff? I mean,
Ken Shamrock and
he hasn't won.
Ken Shamrock won it in '98.
yeah.
Oh yeah, he did. Oh yeah, he did. I forget.
So-
that's one of the ones that really slips my mind.
Don Morocco wasn't. He was heel, right?
Well, but like I'm mostly going through the pay-per-view tournament because for a lot of the one night kings, like Tito Santana's on the list and he's a babyface, but
Yeah.
that was a one night thing, probably just for the live crowd. As far as like pay-per-view or like seen on TV kings, there was King Duggan, who was a babyface, but that was just like an angle to go until he would lose it to Macho Man.
Yeah, and he's not like really 100% like a King of the Ring. Like he's kind of like in that sort of
Bret Hart's
mid-range, right?
Bret Hart's 2 wins are as baby faces.
Yes,
Yeah.
Bret Hart,
The only
Which-
2-time King of the Ring winner.
which his '93 win was basically to set up the fact that this heel who would talk shit on commentary was just upset that there's even a King of the Ring tournament.
Jerry Lawler. Great
Yeah.
stuff.
Great stuff.
So Bret Hart in 93, that's kind of like the modern, not modern, but like that sort of kickstarts like a different era of King of the Ring. And then we've got heel. Ken Shamrock is a babyface. Billy Gunn.
Heel, because heel Kurt, and then babyface Edge, who does nothing with it.
And Lesnar was a heel, right?
Yeah, at that time, yeah.
So we haven't had a babyface King of the Ring since Edge in 2001.
And that
So you
one's
can kind of... Was it?
I was going to say that one's a very technical babyface because that he was essentially a heel in the midst of turning babyface in 2001 King of the Ring. I mean, if me and Rob have obviously gone back and watched that one for the 2001 Wrestling Odyssey, and yeah, it was essentially there were 4 people on the pay-per-view side of the tournament, and he was the 3rd most over guy out of all. At least in my perspective, it was Angle, then Rhino, then Edge, and then Christian.
Boy, that's a weird world where you put Rhino above Edge.
Well, he
And
was.
Angle was the runner-up. I mean, he could have been a back-to-back King of the Ring winner like 93 and 91 with Brett. That's
Yeah,
not
but
really
they weren't
back-to-back,
going to
you know
put
what I mean?
Angle over in 3 matches and the King of the Ring, even though they should have, because he ended up being the biggest babyface for the rest of the year.
Again, go back, check out that 2001 episode.
Oh yeah.
While you're at it, by the way, everybody, you should be following us on Facebook and Twitter at Smark Moment. Haven't taken care of any plugs in a while. So the babyface thing, that kind of makes me go, okay, well, right now, we don't know who's going to be even in the final of this year's King of the Ring. We have currently one semifinal match is Ricochet and Samoa Joe and Baron Corbin. And then the other semifinal match is Chad Gable against Elias. And there is a lot of momentum for pretty much everybody. So everybody could win. But knowing this history of King of the Ring working so much better as a heel gimmick and everything kind of makes me go, all right, well, Ricochet and Chad Gable aren't going to win, even though I feel like they have a very, very good chance of winning.
I think, based on what I've seen of the tournament so far, the right decision is to give it to Chad Gable. But I know they won't do that, and so I'm thinking it's going to go to Elias.
Well, I've been watching the Chad Gable thing. They're clearly pushing him to some degree, so I think he'll be the SmackDown finalist. But I just think it's Baron Corbin crushing somebody's dreams and being the King of the Ring.
Obviously, when we get to next week, we're going to know who's in the final.
And when we get to next week, we can be talking about Samoa Joe versus Elias. So, who knows?
Well, that could very well happen, because Samoa Joe did kind of play around with the whole tweener sort of thing for a little bit, and they teased the idea of Samoa Joe and Chad Gable possibly being in the final, and if that's the case, then either one of them could still win, because it could be like the overcoming the odds type of thing with Chad Gable. It could be, well, you know what, he put up a good fight, but he still lost type of Chad Gable thing. It could be Ricochet beating Elias because of Kevin Owens screwing him over. You could do something like that. There's a lot of different angles, but I just kind of think that like their default is to go with a heel based off of all these different people that have won it in the past. And we'll see how it plays out on Raw and SmackDown next week and Clash of Champions afterward. But let's backtrack a little bit more and talk about the history of King of the Ring and kind of deep dive into some of the specifics behind these. So 1985, you got Don Morocco. I have not watched that. I don't know anything really about his whole run or anything like that. Anybody?
There
have
is
any
no run.
thoughts?
That's a one-night tournament.
Yeah.
I can only assume that he's a babyface due to the fact that he beat the Iron Sheik in the final.
Right.
He's
it
not,
seems like that.
though. That's the interesting thing. It looks like it was a heel versus heel final because he's not a babyface in 85.
Just looking at this Wikipedia, this is pretty interesting. They did that July 8th, 1985. July 14th, 1986. It goes to Harley Race, which we can talk a lot more about. Both of them in Foxborough, Massachusetts.
Yep.
It's like, they have this weird trend, it seems, based off of this King of the Ring, of doing it in the same area. The first two, July, back-to-back years, Foxborough, Massachusetts. The next four are either September or October in Providence, Rhode Island. They've done two of them in Philly, one of them in Pittsburgh, so Pennsylvania's got three of them. They tend to, practically every year for a good stretch there, they had it in that same, week of June 13th, 19th, 25th, 23rd, 28th, 27th, 25th, 24th, 23rd. So, they really kind of, stuck to these trends and stuff. I didn't notice that until I started looking at this list. That's kind of
but that,
weird.
especially those first couple of tournaments, plays into the idea of it being, hey, Foxborough, Massachusetts, don't go to the show in Connecticut where Hulk Hogan's defending because we got the King of the Ring again. And you remember how much fun this was last year? That's kind of the vibe they have going on there.
Very strange. So Morocco, that's kind of like a throwaway type of thing. It's whatever. But King Harley Race, much bigger deal.
Yeah, and they used this on TV as the king, and this is where the King of the Ring crown became almost like the fourth championship, so to speak, and couldn't think of a better guy to put it on, as it really highlighted that Harley Race was wrestling royalty at the time.
Yeah, I think this was the way that, from what I've heard described since obviously Harley Race's death only a couple of months ago at this point. You heard about the idea that this was what the WWE way of getting Harley Race over with the audience, because he already had his long-standing time in the NWA, but Vince felt that to get him over to his audience, he had to have some sort of new gimmick associated with him. So they decided to make him the King, which is it's fine, and I think he was a good character to have it, especially in the latter stages of his in-ring career. But it's just a nice gimmick, and it made the King of the Ring more of a big deal going forward. I think the more interesting.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think the more interesting thing about the Harley Race thing is because he is the guy who, like Rob says, brings the King of the Ring in some sort of almost like mid-card championship. And it's weird in the idea that there are they obviously do the King of the Ring tournaments going forward for the next couple of years, but Harley Race is still considered King of the Ring during all that time.
Well, no, because by the time they get to, what is it, September? Yeah, I guess
September 4th, 87.
Well, yeah, when did Harley Race leave? He was still doing stuff with them in 89, so I guess he was there for a while. That's interesting.
And he was considered the king for that time, and he would engage in feuds with people like Jim Duggan or other people along those lines for the King of the Ring title, even though there was a King of the Ring tournament going on in other times and someone else would be winning it. Harley Race would still be considered the King of the Ring, and that was his gimmick. So it's the idea of Randy Savage wins the next tournament in 87, and he's not that this isn't the Macho King character. He's not the Macho King until 89. So I wouldn't be, I wouldn't like have it against anybody if they were confused that think, oh, this is the Macho King character, but it's not. This is Randy Savage not fresh off of, but a few months after that epic Intercontinental Championship match. This is Randy Savage on the turn to being a babyface and winning the title at WrestleMania 4.
In fact, that tournament, if you look at the brackets, he's not a full-fledged babyface yet, but this was kind of getting him ready for, well, let's see how the people like him when we put him against babyfaces.
And you know what? That was completely lost to me. I was thinking that this was the Macho King thing, but you're right, different era. The years don't match up, which to me is just like, that's astounding. That's the case.
Well, just the amazing thing, the idea of, because Randy Savage wins once Harley Race retires or like goes away from WWE in 89, Bobby Heenan, who was the manager, his manager at the time, passes the title on to King Haku, who's not a classic King of the Ring winner. He never won the King of the Ring tournament, but he's considered a King of the Ring because he was given that title. And then,
so since you're able to follow this a little bit more from, how does this come about? Because we got Randy Savage, we've got Ted DiBiase, we got Tito Santana all around this time frame with Duggan and with Haku. How does this bounce around?
So essentially, I mean, it's probably overly confusing. I think it was just the idea of giving them a title, holding these tournament things in order to attract people, like Rob would say, for these one night special events. And so you'd have people like Randy Savage in 87 and Ted DiBiase in 88 win the tournament, but Harley Race was still considered the de facto King of the Ring because he still came out of the crown, he still came out of the robe, he still defended that title against people like Junkyard Dog and Jim Duggan and all those other lines of things. Whereas what eventually would end up happening is, so he leaves the company in 89, they give the title to Haku instead because Bobby Heenan essentially just awards it to him based on the fact that he previously managed Harley Race, and so it just goes to another member of the Heenan family. And then I believe Haku loses it to
Duggan.
He loses it to Duggan, and then Duggan holds it for a little while and then loses it to Randy Savage, and Randy Savage becomes the Macho King off the back of that.
And
then this is coming from the guy who said, I'm so ill-equipped for this one.
Well, you can read Wikipedia or anything like that to just figure out this side of things. It's just a case of, I thought that was interesting because I, like most people, would have just like immediately assumed that, oh yeah, Randy Savage is a King of the Ring winner, so that's the Macho King thing because I'm very familiar with the Macho King stuff. But no, that doesn't happen until a year late, like years later at this point.
Which that explains that gap with they go from Tito Santana in 1989, October 1989, to Bret Hart beats IRS September 7th, 1991, because Macho King is going on around that time frame. Why are you going to do a King of the Ring if you've got Macho King? Like, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
that's out of the first times that they had started doing this whole King of the Ring thing, ignoring the fact that they had multiple kings at the same time, that at least makes sense for them to abandon it that year.
Well, yeah, because Savage was doing it perfectly, and he had elevated the crown to a thing where it wasn't even defended anymore. He was just the Macho King, and that was his next level of being a heel.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
so
so,
that one is like, okay, I can see why you wouldn't have a 1990 King of the Ring tournament.
and then obviously you get to 91 where Savage is retired, at least temporarily, by the Ultimate Warrior. So the King gimmick is dead, and so you can bring it back. I just find it more interesting about the fact that Savage won that King of the Ring title and became the Macho King in September of 89, and then the tournament for the quote unquote King of the Ring happened the month afterwards, and it just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, Santana, like, nobody, when they're bringing up King of the Ring winners in the past, nobody's ever like, remember Santana's run? Like, it's not a thing. But that explains the 90 thing, but then the 92 range, that's disappeared, and I can't seem to find an actual reason why that's not the thing.
Because there was nobody. If you look at, I'm going through the brackets here on Wikipedia, and some of them are interesting. Like 88 sees Shawn Michaels as a singles competitor, which is unique. 88 also sees Virgil competing, which was not normal. And in 91, there's like Pete Doherty is in this tournament, and he wasn't even like an on TV, established guy. So he's just acting as a substitute for Kerry Von Erich. And I think if you look at 92, that's the year where we're missing Hogan, we're missing a lot of players. So there just wasn't a real roster to handle a King of the Ring type of deal.
I'm looking at the 92 roster right now, or at least what this one website seems to claim. I could see a lot of people potentially being a King of the Ring. British Bulldog would have worked. This is, of course, depending on when they would have done it, at what point of the year, and all the other kind of things that go along with that. But British Bulldog, I think. Jake Roberts could have been King of the Ring. They could have done technically, they could have given it to, like, Jimmy Snuka, Kerry Von Erich. King Mr. Perfect would have been
Well,
fun.
he wasn't wrestling until November. See,
that depends on when they're doing that. King Shawn Michaels definitely would have worked out.
Michaels would have worked at any point in the year because he was the fresh up and coming heel. So if you were going to do King of the Ring in 92, it would have gone to Shawn.
Yeah, and they could have gone with Razor Ramon. They could have gone with Roddy Piper, Ric Flair, of course, depending on the different times. Technically speaking, Sid, 1992. They could have gone with King Sid. King Tatanka.
Yeah,
I mean, that would have
world
worked.
is clamoring for.
It would have worked, though, I think, back in that time frame. Like, imagine, and this is like that sort of, it's a little hokey, but it could still work. King Tatanka with that whole, like, royal headdress type of thing.
Yep,
That
that's
could have been
exactly
something.
what popped into my head.
Yeah. King Ultimate Warrior could have been
No,
a thing. King Yokozuna. There's options. I think that they could have done it.
there's definitely options, but unfortunately, like we've said, the names that you've mentioned don't all come together at one point. I don't think a lot of them are fragmented throughout the year.
Yeah, I don't think there's any sort of like real clear determining reason for it. Just feel like they may have just had other priorities in that year than doing another tournament for that.
Yeah. But then Bret Hart comes in. Bret Hart is, obviously, we talked about him a little bit. There's the whole the Burger King thing, the promo with that. There's the Jerry Lawler feud. But I gotta say, one of the things that I consider one of the best reasons why Bret Hart was King of the Ring is that feud between Bret and Owen is so good in so many different ways. And one of my favorite parts about that is this one-upsmanship angle that they had done where Bret Hart and Owen Hart, they're brothers, everything's good, brothers don't fight. We've heard that story before.
I love that
And
story.
yeah. And Owen, leading up to challenging for that championship and everything, there's certain stepping stones along the way that really help that story. And one of the main ones is he wins King of the Ring, and he's the King of Hearts, Owen Hart, where it's like, my brother Bret, he won the King of the Ring, and I won the King of the Ring, and I'm a better king than he ever was, and all that. I fucking love King Owen Hart.
So there's so much nuance to that story. Like, they have the little spat at Survivor Series where Owen's like, I'm sick of being in your shadow. Jump to the Rumble, where you think they made up, but they end up going for the tag titles, and Owen gets mad that Bret didn't tag him in. Totally justified, by the way. Then they get to WrestleMania, which is actually like Bret's crowning moment. But Owen beats him earlier in the night, and he still doesn't get the glory. So he's just like, fuck it. I'm going to do what you did. Only I'm going to do it better, and I'm going to win the King of the Ring. And he did it with the help of Jim Neidhart, who had actually caused Bret to lose a match to Diesel by DQ just to preserve the title for Owen. And I think like all of that was told over the course of 6 months or whatever, amazing storytelling.
One of the best.
Yeah,
and I think that even just the idea of calling him the King of Hearts is a good switch up a little bit to give people like their own special little tweak.
I love how braggadocious Owen Hart was always with his titles and his awards.
He's
like
a two-time Slammy Award winner.
yeah. I mean, he was just.
I love that so much
because he was a guy who was so good at for a guy who played such a good like fiery underdog babyface. He was so good as a heel that would just get under your skin. He's just a guy who, when he achieves something, he wants to make sure that everybody in the world knows that he achieved something. And that's when he played those characters, it was just always so effective. Especially because in this case, he was coming off the coattails of Bret winning it twice in a row. So he has an opportunity to cement himself as his own legacy. The King of Hearts name is great. The fact that he essentially this is a springboard to him challenging Bret for the title at SummerSlam as well in that great steel cage match. Yeah, this is a fantastic victory and one of the times where the King of the Ring was used at its most effective.
Yeah, and he kept that King of Hearts name for the entirety of his career. That's how good it was. Just the laughter that we got out of that brief discussion of Owen Hart. You hear the stories come out of after the tragedy of, Owen wasn't really into wrestling. Like, that stories come out. And it's like, that's bullshit. Because he relished every moment and he really understood how to get the most out of an audience. And easily one of the favorite King of the Rings. Again, if I had a Mount Rushmore, he's the first name I'm putting on a Mount Rushmore of King of the Ring.
He absolutely would be on my Mount Rushmore of King of the Rings. Kings of the Rings. Whatever. KOTR. We're going to round out that podcast. This podcast, not that one. We're going to probably wrap up with the Mount Rushmore thing, so let's put a pin in that one for now, but we'll talk about that. Let's keep this going. We talked a little about Mabel. Mabel was a joke in a lot of ways. King Mabel's something that people reference a lot of just being like, "Ooh, that was not a good King of the Ring." I can see where they were going. It just happened to be 1995 was rough.
1995 was rough. Like, and I wasn't kidding earlier when I said if you look at anyone who headlined on the heel side of things in 95, only one of them really matters the next year, and it's Shawn. Like, 95 was really rough, and I think it's cemented in this tournament when you look at the fact that you got like the Roadie and Sparky Plug. And
you got Mantar in this tournament.
Mantar's in the fucking tournament. Savio Vega is your Iron Man. He does 4 matches that night. Uh, it's just so wild. Uh, it gets Mabel over. Mabel's the first dude to pin Taker since Hulk Hogan in '91, which is another just crazy statistic. Uh, yeah, King Mabel.
Looking at this group and not remembering exactly where everybody was in the card and all that, the alternative options, I mean, Mabel is still better than some of them. Like, King Mantar wouldn't have worked.
Ha,
King Jacob Blue, come on.
ha.
King the Roadie, no.
King the Roadie,
Yeah.
not King of the Road or something unique.
Or King Roadie, King the Roadie.
He's
The
just
Roadie
the
King.
Road.
And if you need somebody who's a heel to go up against Diesel, you kind of have to rule out some of the other options. Adam Bomb was a babyface around that point, I'm pretty sure.
Mhm.
Undertaker was definitely a babyface. So, and King Undertaker, that he never would have been able to do that really well, unless it would have been like the King of Darkness.
The
or
King of the
something weird.
Dead. What do you mean? He would have done that so perfectly. Though they could have made that work.
It wouldn't have worked as like an actual like sit on the throne type thing though, for sure. And he was a babyface, so that wouldn't have worked either. But I could see an argument being made for King Kama.
Yeah, that's if I absolutely had to go with a heel, I'm going with Kama.
And I could have seen King Yokozuna.
Not at that point. I think at that point he was like winding down.
Yeah, he was on the latter end of that. You could tell in like 96, for instance, that they're just putting Vader over instead of him and stuff. But like I could have seen that being like a little resurgence for Yokozuna. And technically they could have gone King Kong Bundy. He could have been double King Kong Bundy, but Mabel was the younger guy, and that makes more sense. You know, they wouldn't have gone with like King Luger then because he was a babyface, and I can see why they went with Mabel, even though it ended up being awful in a lot of ways.
You didn't mention the possibility of the Heartbreak King, and I think that could have been a reality.
Well, he was a babyface, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he's Sean. Who the fuck? Who the fuck cares?
Yeah,
He's
but I mean,
Shawn.
they couldn't have had him go up against Diesel, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he did.
Well, especially after they had already wrestled at WrestleMania that previous year as well, in the
Yeah,
like months before, prior to this as well. So I think just by looking at the bracket and how describing this one, you basically coming up with the assumption that, well, there's worse options than Mabel. It's pretty much like a damning indictment of this entire year in like WWF's history.
yeah, it really is.
It's just,
I mean-
the idea of like, because I've suffered through the Mabel against Diesel match from SummerSlam. It's I can't describe how bad watching a guy who doesn't want to work and a guy who's too fat to work really just gets tiresome, because it's just awful on all
doesn't
levels.
work.
Well, yeah, one of them definitely doesn't work at any point in time in his career. It's an atrocious tournament. It's an atrocious winner. I think this is about. But funnily enough, I wouldn't say this is the worst King of the Ring, but I would say it's very, very high up there.
What would you say was the worst?
We'll get to it.
Okay,
Well-
I'll bring it up when we get to it.
Well,
Thankfully, though, they turn it around. Or do you want to keep talking about Mabel?
not so much Mabel.
He always
but
wants to be talking about Mabel.
Well, no, that's Tony's gimmick. Not so much Mabel, but I think
He's my Bam Neely in 95.
if you talk about the card itself on this King of the Ring show, it's headlined by Diesel and Bam Bam against Tatanka and Sid, and if that is not an indication of oh my 95 is shit, then I don't know what is. And you also have the wonderful Kiss My Foot match because, believe it or not, 2 years later, Brett and Lawler are still going at it. And it's just, it's peak 95 and it's peak, wow, we need a change.
Lawler would have been.
Britain, 93 is like, man, I'm going to get the most out of 93, 94, and 95.
Lawler would have been a great King of the Ring for this one.
Yeah.
already
Ironically,
the king.
they only put him in the 97 tournament.
Yeah,
Really? That's it?
Yeah.
Wow, that
So-
seems strange.
That's a weird missed opportunity, isn't it?
Maybe because they don't want to have Jerry the King Lawler and just be like, all right, what do we change here? Like, you know what I mean?
He's King. The King. He's King the King.
King Jerry the King Lawler.
Jerry the Ring King Lawler.
Well, thankfully, 95 goes away, and they get Stone Cold Steve Austin in 1996. And we talked about this earlier. Rob brought up the whole idea of you tweak a little bit of fate and things turn out differently. It wasn't supposed to be him. It was supposed to be Hunter Hearst Helmsley. It even seemed like during that night, fate was working against him because he ended up having to go to the hospital, and you know, it just worked out. And he cuts that promo with Jake the Snake Roberts setting everything up with the John 3:16, and he throws out Austin 3:16, says, I just whipped your ass. Ends up selling 30 fucking billion t-shirts. I had one of them. That is the type of thing that, like, you weren't necessarily even a wrestling fan and you knew what Austin 3:16 was all about. I had so much Stone Cold Steve Austin gear back in like 97 or so, because this is again that range where I got real into WWE or WWF at the time. I had always been like a fan of it from a little kid and all that, but like 96 is that range where I'm like, okay, this is my jam kind of thing. And I remember the Ringmaster and thinking he was atrocious and just being like, this goober is awful. And why are they making this guy seem like he's a big deal at Royal Rumble 96? This dude looks lame. He looks tiny. Shawn Michaels towers over him in this match. All this other kind of thing.
Isn't that weird?
It's really
Isn't
weird.
that fucking weird?
Because you could go back in time and be like, you don't realize how big Austin's going to be, kid. Because he's just, you know, he was a guy that I was like, oh, this guy could totally lose to Bob Holly. Bob Holly's so much bigger than this guy. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like Austin 3:16 happens and you're like, this is amazing. And he ends up going on to become a fucking megastar.
Well, just how you break him down to his constituent parts. He is a bald guy who comes to the ring wearing black trunks and black boots. And that's it.
Yeah, he's a nobody. Like, there's nothing that stands out to him at that point.
He looks like he basically is coming out in the young boy attire from New Japan.
I would argue, if you don't know Stunning Steve from WCW ECW, it's essentially the same exact feeling of 2010 Daniel Bryan. If you don't know Bryan Danielson and you're looking at this fucking dude on NXT, you're like, why do I care? He looks like my accountant.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was doing back then with Daniel Bryan. I was like, I don't get it. Why is everybody going nuts over this dude?
I never let that accountant anywhere near my taxes. Considering how drunk he was, kind of way. But I
some other people in this tournament at this time frame that were such bigger characters: Ahmed Johnson, Vader, Goldust, Ultimate Warrior. I mean, that wasn't like really like Ultimate Warrior stuff, but it was. Hunter Hearst Helmsley, like he should have been in the mix there. Jake Roberts was the veteran, so, you know, whatever. But they were doing something with Justin Bradshaw. They had Bob Holly. They had Savio Vega. Mark Merrow was a pretty big deal around that time frame. Skip wasn't. Marty Jannetty really wasn't and all that. But, like, they could have very easily gone with King Ahmed. They could have very, very easily gone with King Vader. You know, Austin wasn't, like, the go-to obvious pick.
He wasn't the pick at all. Like, I think he would have gotten at least to the semifinals. I think semifinals in a different time might have been Jake Roberts and Hunter and Merrow Austin, and then you get that Merrow Hunter feud pays off at the King of the Ring with Hunter going over, and it's just, I love Triple H, but my God, we would have been losing so much here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much impossible to downplay the significance of this match playing out the exact way that it did. And because not only does it obviously fuck Stone Cold Steve Austin's career and the rise and all that WWE thing, it fucks Triple H's career, I believe, if he wins this tournament. Because if he wins this tournament, he becomes King Hunter. He becomes King Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and with the blue blood gimmick he already had, it basically means he's stuck in that gimmick for the rest of his career.
Yeah, he doesn't make any real changes.
No. And
what would they have done? Would they really have pushed him towards anything? He would have had some match against Shawn Michaels, and he would have lost, and that would have been the end of it.
yeah. At this point in his career, he was so not ready for that level. By next year, where he'd had obviously a bit more reps under it, and he'd been able to develop his character a little bit more and move away from the very like stereotypical blue blood character into just more of just being himself, then that was the right time to do it. At this point in time, it would have been far too soon.
Yeah, and for that matter, 1997, there were some other options that could have happened, but that was Triple H. I mean, they could have technically gone with King Ahmed, but he had been past that point of really being a focal point.
Nope, you're wrong. The pay-per-view goes off the air with him laying out The Undertaker.
Well, Ahmed was doing the whole feuding with the Nation of Domination.
Yeah, and he's about to join them. He was actually supposed to main event the next pay-per-view.
Yeah, but I mean, that, like, not long after that, Ahmed's not even a factor.
Yeah, injuries get in the way and stuff like that.
And, like, Crush was involved with the Nation of Domination, and Goldust was, like, getting really weird, and Mankind, Mankind would have been fun, but, you know.
This Goldust Lawler match, is it the match where beforehand Jerry Lawler cuts a promo? Yeah, like.
It might have been.
Wow, what a time.
Yeah, I couldn't do that anymore. So that's like, you almost kind of have to lump in 96, 97 together with that Triple H story. A little asterisk, if you want to put that out there. But that worked out really well for him in the long run. 98, Ken Shamrock, not the same.
Yeah, didn't even matter.
Yeah, can we talk about the fact that in that 97 tournament, Triple H has entered into it twice?
Yeah, we can. Because again, there's an asterisk next to his name, and Vader was supposed to get that spot against Crush, but he had broken his nose the month before against Ken Shamrock. So my guess is it would have been Hunter goes over Ahmed on TV, and then Hunter and Vader at the pay-per-view in the semifinals.
Well, I would have thought that the original plan would actually have been to go Ahmed over Vader, because Vader was on his way out of the company. Well, was pretty close to being out of the company eventually anyway, or at this point had been pretty much relegated to a lower mid card thing.
Yeah. So it might have been Ahmed over Vader, and then Helmsley, because the Helmsley Crush thing is what doesn't make sense.
Well,
they're both heels.
Well, yeah, I think the more interesting part about that is that match went nearly 20 minutes long. He had a nearly 20-minute match against Crush.
18 minutes, 56 seconds. That's crazy.
And this just goes to my argument that Triple H always needs to have the longest match on the show.
Yeah, why is that match nearly 20 minutes? The Ahmed match goes 3:25. Wait, is that the same TV episode? Does he go 21 minutes because he goes 3 minutes with Ahmed and 18 with Crush?
I don't know if it was the same exact episode, but it's just the idea of wild. But it's just the idea of like I just imagine Triple H thinking at that point in time, yeah, I think I can get 20 minutes out of this guy.
And possibly did.
I don't know about how good the quality of the match was, because I'll go back and checking all that out. But I mean, that's crazy to think, though, like that certain things work out like that.
And he still gets an asterisk next to his name, even though God tournament.
If you love these kind of discussions that we got going on and you want to hear more of these kinds of random things, let me just throw out a plug really quick. We have the Patreon, and that helps us do quite a bit of different things here. One of them being the Mount Rushmore types of things. Again, we're going to allude to that a little bit later on. Not allude to that, it's not the right word. We're going to wrap things up with that. Why did I think allude would be the word for that? Oh, well, doesn't matter. We love doing these kinds of extra things, and if you want us to be able to have the time to do more discussions and maybe go back and watch something like a previous King of the Ring and kind of do like a fan tracks or something like that, hit up the Patreon and request that, because we've gotten a quick shout out here to Kyle Ritz and Guest 5 for upping their Patreon stuff. Many thanks for those donations, everybody. But if you got $1, you got $5 or whatever, and you do the patreon.com/SmarkOutMoment, or for that matter, Fanboys Anonymous, then we can do more fun things. So just putting it out there. And just
fun things are fun, yeah.
Fun things are fun. And thank you again to Kyle Ritz and to Guest 5. So Ken Shamrock, yeah. Not the best King of the Ring.
This should have been The Rock.
Yeah, it probably should have. There's a bunch of other people in the mix, and I mean, I can't really justify having like King Terry Funk, or at this point, Mark Merrow is past that point. Maybe Jeff Jarrett. Maybe that would have worked. Jeff Jarrett did have the type of person who he could have been a King of the Ring. I could see that. I don't know about this year in particular. But maybe that. King Dan Severn, no.
He's the king of the Ultimate Fight world, Tony.
King X-Pac, no. Like Scorpio. Yeah. So I would say it should have been The Rock. It should have been maybe Jeff Jarrett, and then trying out the Ken Shamrock thing. Because just Ken Shamrock as King of the Ring didn't do anything.
Well, let's not forget that this show that it took place on is not remembered at all for the King of the Ring tournament.
Yeah, fuck that. Because Mick Foley almost died.
Because the exact match after Ken Shamrock is crowned King of the Ring, a guy nearly dies multiple times, being thrown off a cell.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't think anyone was thinking about, oh, it should have been The Rock rather than Ken Shamrock or anything like that sort of time. I was just thinking, oh my god, we almost saw a guy kill himself multiple times.
Imagine writing up like a biggest takeaways of the card type of thing after that. Like if I had been like writing for websites back then, and I'm like, so Ken Shamrock won King of the Ring at King of the Ring. But anyway, let's talk about Mankind.
Mankind nearly dies and still makes a run in at the end of the night. Mick Foley's fucking inhuman, dude.
Crazy. Love that guy. But you follow Ken Shamrock up in 98 with Billy Gunn in 99, and I can see where they were going again, but it's kind of like the Mabel thing where it's like, I understand in retrospect what you were thinking, but it did not work out. And I like Billy Gunn. I still think that Billy Gunn had the potential to be a world champion.
Oh, boy.
King Billy Gunn. Oof.
So I haven't seen this show in forever, but I was under the impression, because I know China was in it, and I know China fought Road Dogg, I thought that they had gotten down to the Final Four, just being like a DX thing, which I think would have worked. But, yeah, Billy Gunn, huh?
Yeah, this is I think, the dirt worst King of the Ring winner by, I think, actually a considerable margin. Because even though Mabel was terrible in the ring, at least they were pushing him at this point in time. With Billy Gunn, first of all, even the concept of splitting him away from DX was ridiculous in itself, because Gunn was great as the hype man for Road Dogg's great like promos and the catchphrases and stuff like that. Essentially, Billy Gunn was there to do more of the in-ring work as a tag team wrestler and to say that thing at the end of Road Dogg's promo.
Well, this was during the 6 months where they were trying to, like, actually split DX and let them be their own people and do their own thing. And you will see very much why. By November of that year, they're all right back under Triple H's wing.
This is when he's going around calling himself Mr. Ass, right?
Yes.
So
yeah, it's well past that point, I think.
He's King Ass.
He's king of all asses.
He's an ass king. You know?
So, yeah, it's just like
it sounds like a Pornhub site or something.
like pretty much immediately after this, he's being buried by The Rock.
Yeah,
and I think, and I know people have a go at The Rock for burying people. I think in this case, it's entirely justified, because I'll go as far as say it. I don't see how, like, I can see where you're coming from for it, but I personally have gone back and watched it, and obviously with the miracle of hindsight and all that other stuff, it's just a case of I can't see how anyone ever thought that Billy Gunn was a potential main eventer or title holder, because he was the Jannetty of his tag team. by a considerable margin.
Yeah,
He might not have even he might have been the better wrestler out of the two, but Road Dogg had all of the personality, all of the charisma, all of the like thing that made the New Age Outlaws operate correctly was all down to the Road Dogg. I don't even give part of it to Billy Gunn.
That's a package deal. That's why they were such a good tag team, but neither of them were able to get to that level on their own. Because
Yeah,
Road
because
Dogg was never the type of where it'd be like, oh man, can you see Road Dogg becoming world champion? Nah. But if Billy Gunn had the verbal skills of Road Dogg, Billy Gunn had the look. Billy Gunn had the in-ring work.
well,
So
I've
outside of the asthma thing, which that's a whole different discussion, but you give that, like, you combine the New Age Outlaws, you merge them together, so to speak, and you give Billy Gunn that ability to cut that promo. I think King Billy Gunn would have probably gone really well, but then his completely different career would have, the career path would have been different too. So
Well-
it would have been better than Rockabilly.
Well, yeah. Well, anything would be better than that. But it's just the idea of I don't think his in-ring skills are very much overstated. I don't think he was bad by any stretch of the imagination. He was definitely, especially for the time, he was very good. But
He was
I just
solid.
think
He was no Shawn Michaels.
I think he's a great, from what I see, like one of these people who's a great hot tag guy. He's a guy that comes in, does a lot of like nice power moves and a bit of athleticism, but can't stretch that out over a 10 to 20-minute match. He can do
I
it.
could see that.
He can do it for like 2-3 minutes at a time, and then he gets blown up, and then he decides to, and then that's when it's time to go home. But
I think this is best summed up by the fact that his punchline during the DX Hall of Fame speech was, "We can always count on Billy Gunn to overpromise and underdeliver." And I think that is his career, like, in a nutshell.
yeah, that is pretty much it, really. But yeah, I just don't think this worked out like in any way, shape, or form in the way that they were potentially hoping it to. I don't even think they even really tried to push Billy Gunn off the back of this. If like any sort of memory from like retrospective things that I've looked back on, I don't think they gave him the match with The Rock at, was it SummerSlam or something like that?
SummerSlam, kiss my ass match.
Yeah, and and then The Rock wins that one, and then I think pretty much from that point on, Billy Gunn's just a guy again.
Yeah.
Seems like it's another victim of, let's do something. Oh, I've already changed my mind. That ADHD type of booking that WWE does here and there, where we got something that's dangled in front of us and it's a shiny new toy, and then we heard another noise. And what's that?
I'll go as far as to say this might be controversial, but looking at this bracket, you should have just given it to China.
They could have potentially done it. China was big.
Let China just make the history, be the queen of the ring, and then there's your moment for 1999.
Yeah, could have probably gone better in the long run. Kurt Angle wins in 2000, and I had not been watching at this point, I'm pretty sure. So
I vaguely remember this. I know that he beat Rikishi in the end, and he briefly did the King Kurt stuff, but I don't really recall much of the 2000 tournament.
I've gone back and watched the 2000 tournament like in more recent years, and it's more actually about Rikishi than it is Kurt Angle. And actually, I actually quite enjoy a lot of the storyline intricacies that were built into this tournament because, so the first match between Rikishi and Chris Benoit, the story leading into that was that Rikishi had just beaten Chris Benoit for the Intercontinental Championship because Benoit was being slowly promoted up until the into the World Championship scene. And so Benoit just takes a steel chair to him and beats the crap out of him in that match, rather than actually finish the match, so it just ends in a DQ. This is the same time where they're trying to push Val Venus as just a wrestler. He's no longer a porn star.
They have a good cage match next month.
You've got the Eddie Guerrero-China relationship going on in the middle of this one. You've got Crash Holly being an underdog story, beating Bull Buchanan and making it all the way to the semi-finals. You obviously have, and then it all leads towards like Kurt Angle finally beating Rikishi for the final thing, which was meant to immediately elevate Angle into the main event picture because Angle at this point, he'd already won the Intercontinental Championship, had been a European champion, he'd been involved in, already competed at WrestleMania, been involved in a lot of the stuff. This was just the next step in his fast tracking to the main event scene. I mean, he was WWE champion only a few months after this.
Yep.
but this was kind of at the point where the thing that led off the back of this was his angle with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon.
This is unreal. I'm looking at these times, and the longest King of the Ring match is Angle and Jericho, and that goes under 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's like I said that already started the podcast.
I know, but I'm looking at the numbers, and they're really short.
Sure.
A lot of these don't even crack 5 minutes.
This is 2000 WWE. This is what they did. All matches were pretty much like 2 to 3 minute long, not squash matches, but just do all your big stuff, and then we've got to move on to the backstage segment we've got going on.
And that's why I stopped watching.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh my god, I get it. You're talking about The Rock when The Rock isn't on screen because you want to have people remember that The Rock is there. Can we go 10 minutes without talking about Austin? You know, like that kind of thing.
But
so I missed out on the Kurt Angle thing.
The Angle coronation was fun, and Angle wearing the crown and all that stuff was pretty, like, because he just makes all this stuff hilarious. But I think it was pretty much, I want to say, like, I think the King of the Ring helped elevate him further and helped build up his prestige further, so it was beneficial in that regard, but it didn't do anything in terms of him being a king of the ring. So that wasn't part of the gimmick, because it immediately transitioned over into the feud with Stephanie and Triple H, which was just about the relationship side of things. The King of the Ring never really played a part in it.
We already talked quite a bit about Edge. Any other thoughts about Edge?
Go listen to 2001 wrestling.
Yeah, you can list that, but just as like a really brief synopsis, it wasn't the right time for him to be the champion, for him to be a King of the Ring or at that kind of level. I appreciate what they were trying to do, but it didn't work.
King Edge the Awesome or something, I think is what he went by.
He tried to for like a minute.
Yeah.
And then they go to Brock Lesnar, and of course Brock Lesnar is on this run where it's like, let's give Brock everything possible. Like, he wins Royal Rumble and King of the Ring and the title, and it's just like, just a checklist of like a 2-year period, it seems, where Brock wins everything imaginable. If they would have had Money in the Bank, then he would have won that. If they would have had everything, he would have won it, you know?
Yeah, they were completely
Makes
right.
sense.
And yeah, they were completely right to do so. Because
Yeah.
he is a once-in-a-lifetime freak athlete. Just, even though nowadays it's hard to really appreciate him because of the fact that they just keep giving the title when he keeps going away and all the other side of things, people have to remember that this guy is... There's never going to be another guy like Brock Lesnar in WWE, I don't think. At least not in our lifetimes of our fandom of watching it. He is a unique talent in every sense of the word.
Brock Lesnar is as legitimate of a King of the Ring as you can get.
Absolutely.
Like, he looks like the type of person who should win a tournament of being the most legit fighter.
He has. He's won several NCAA tournaments.
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah. And obviously he beat Rob Van Dam in the final of this one to win it, and this actually led to a match in the next pay-per-view, Vengeance, where Brock Lesnar actually challenged for the Intercontinental Championship for, I think, the one and only time of his career.
Yep.
And, well, I think lost the match by DQ. So I think that was just an argument saying, okay, so we can't have Lesnar lose because he's about to challenge for the WWE Championship, but we can't have him win either because he's going to win the WWE Championship. It's one of those weird instances, like, oh, we've put this match and now we really can't do anything with it.
Yeah, I hate when they do that.
Yeah.
So then they take off 2003, 2004, 2005. Seemingly no reason. Maybe there's a reason why. It could just be as simple as, I don't fucking like that King of the Ring tournament. Why are we doing that again? But they bring it back, and they give it to Booker T. And King Booker, fucking amazing in a lot of ways. Kind of bothersome in some other ways. But I had gotten back into it around this time. And, you know, I take a couple years off, and I'm trying to reacquaint myself with certain things, and DX is back, and that's the reason why I actually came back to watching that. And I'm kind of like, not fully into it. I'm watching Raw every once in a while, but I'm being a little delusional about myself, going, I don't really want to watch this. And then the next week comes along and I'm like, there's nothing else going on Monday night. I guess I'll turn on Raw in the background, whatever, that kind of thing. And I had known Booker T from WCW, and I just assumed that the King of the Ring tournament had been continuing for the past bunch of years and whatever. And I was like, oh, cool, like Booker T's King of the Ring. What the fuck is he doing? And it took a little bit of adjustment, but I think that King Booker ended up being one of their better ones, especially over the past 20 years.
Oh
Yeah.
absolutely. This was the best run of his WWE career. As being the King Booker gimmick, it's so off piece because the entire run of him as a babyface was that he was an underdog who had been on the streets, who'd been in jail previously, like grown up with tons of siblings and a single mother and all on those lines, like such like real like working class backgrounds. And then he wins the King of the Ring and he becomes the royalist, essentially. Just a complete elitist that's loves to live in like feudal monarchy times where he's got a court and knights surrounding him to protect him, and he wears a crown and a robe everywhere. It was such a huge divergent, but it was so well portrayed by him. I think this is the epitome of doing the King of the Ring gimmick well.
Yeah, and goes a little further in that WWE mentality of he was finally able to have a run because they finally had enough of a hand in the molding of it. Like, he's King Booker now. We finally elevated past this WCW Booker T. At least that's the vibe I get from it, especially in retrospect. Because you look and it's wild that he didn't get another shot to be on top like he did here. But this was just a completely separate character. And I think that's why it was allowed to shine.
And it could just been a case where maybe there weren't better options and they decided to go with that and they just kind of kept continuing onto it. And then it just happened to play out like, well, now we're going to have the Rey Mysterio thing and Booker. Yeah, well, how about we do it with Booker? You know, like it could have just been the right recipe, all things kind of going about. Because right now, looking at the only 8 people that were involved in this, Kurt Angle had already won. Matt Hardy, King Matt Hardy, I don't think would have made sense back then, but maybe so. It's hard for me to fully remember. Chris Benoit, that's a babyface thing. They don't like the babyface King of the Ring. Finlay, of course, he got involved in elsewhere, and I don't think that they would have prioritized him over anybody else. Mark Henry, not his role. Bobby Lashley, he was the runner-up. So it's kind of like Booker T makes sense in that bracket. And they kind of ran with it. And he got a world title reign out of it. That is his only world title reign in WWE. Unless you count the WCW type things. And as far as I'm aware, he's the only person who's actively King of the Ring and became the champion.
Yeah. That is a pretty cool little piece of history for him.
So you can kind of argue that he was the most successful King of the Ring.
In terms of the gimmick, I think he probably was.
Kayfabe-wise, you can throw it out there.
I'm looking at this bracket here, and the only other reasonable name for like a King of the Ring would have been Finlay, and he was better off as a knight.
Yeah, it's definitely a case of the case can definitely be made of the idea that Booker T is the King of the Ring to end all King of the Rings, just based on how much he committed into the gimmick and the fact that he held the World Championship at the same time as portraying this character.
And then they take a year off, no King of the Ring in 2007, partially because King Booker is going strong enough. Like, they just did that. Do you really want to go with a whole nother thing? They bring it back, we do the William Regal thing. We talked about Regal already. He beats CM Punk in the final. I don't think King CM Punk would have really worked, but he could have probably been able to figure out some way to do it.
Well, you think
That's-
2000 is bad? You got to see the times for some of these matches. Longest match out of the 7 matches that took place was 6 minutes 21 seconds.
Wow.
And Hornswoggle's in that.
Oh yeah,
Not that match, but he's in the bracket.
yeah, solid 18 seconds for that match with him and William Regal.
Oh,
What was the whole thing with Kennedy?
what do you mean?
That wasn't 2010, was it?
No, okay. Well, Kennedy he had come back from his own injury, I believe, and that's just how they got rid of Regal. There was nothing really to that.
Yeah, that was how they essentially just used Kennedy coming back from injury as a chance to get rid of Regal as the general manager so he could go do his suspension.
See, I kind of that's weird. I lumped this together in my brain as being that he was a part of that King of the Ring tournament.
Nope.
That's so weird. I guess I just edited a bunch of months worth of material.
I think King
That
MVP would have been cool.
He could have pulled it off. I mean, it would have been kind of transitioning the same type of character and just upping some other elements of it. But God, King the Great Khali, that would have been awful. King Khali. Obviously, they could not have gone with King Hornswoggle, but this was during a time frame which was frustrating as hell, where they loved Hornswoggle, and they gave him so much shit. So, I do remember at that time thinking to myself, if you fucking give Hornswoggle King of the Ring, I think I'm done again. I hated Hornswoggle so much.
This is a year after the McMahon son storyline, right?
I think it's the same year.
2008, yeah, I think. I know, because 2007 is the because that's Benoit death.
Right, that's the
that one.
Benoit thing, so that's why they did that. So he's already quote unquote Finley's son here. Regal, based on the match results here on Wikipedia, they're putting him over really strong. It's an 18-second submission, 3-minute 37-second knockout, and 4-minute submission against a guy who would go on to be one of the biggest stars of all time.
Yeah, and things don't work out well because the wellness policy and all that. And we already talked about Sheamus. We already talked about Bad News Barrett. I don't think there's really anything else we can talk about that.
I do.
Yes,
I
sir?
do want to go through the 2010 bracket and see if there was anything here. So
I remember thinking that Sheamus was a solid, all right, that's guy's probably going to win.
there's actually some pretty good names here. There's McIntyre, there's Swagger, there's Kofi, there's Cody, Del Rio.
Mysterio.
So yeah, there's a solid list of dudes here. I guess they just really wanted to go with that Sheamus gimmick.
And I don't necessarily fault them for it. Back then, I really didn't like it, but King Sheamus, it could work, It just didn't really. He had already won the title. Where are you going to go from there?
They could have easily put it on McIntyre. I don't know why they tend to just ignore McIntyre.
McIntyre's completely got this main roster gimmick of, this guy's going to be a big deal. We don't want him to be. We're not going to give him any of these matches that to win, but hey, we're going to tell you that he's going to be a big deal. It's 10 years later. I'm telling you, he's going to make it.
I think that's probably
Loses
why
the first round of King of the Ring this year.
I think that's probably why his tag team with Dolph Ziggler worked out.
I just thought about that right now. It's the exact same thing, except one guy is taller and more built.
Really quickly, let me toss out another couple plugs here. Merchandise shops, if you are interested. TeePublic and Redbubble for Smark Out Moment, Fanboys Anonymous, and A Mango Tees. And Fanboys Anonymous is my site for geek culture topics like movie reviews, TV shows, video games, comic books, etc. So go check that out if you haven't already. So we ran down all that stuff with King of the Ring. There's two more things that I kind of want to talk about here. One of them being, I think that in a way, from that 2000s, the 2007 onward type of thing, they almost kind of replaced King of the Ring with Money in the Bank.
Yeah.
You get that kind of feeling?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'd probably say so. It's a way of giving somebody a moniker essentially to
Mr. Money in the Bank instead of King of the Ring. Yeah.
yeah, and that gives them an opportunity like that had more meaning attached to it than a lot of the King of the Ring tournaments did.
Yeah, you can't
And
use the King of the Ring tournament as a get out of jail free card when somebody gets injured.
Yeah, the Money in the Bank has a lot more flexibility. You can kind of do a similar thing. You're not pigeonholed into a hokey. I mean, they don't have to do the King of the Ring being like, oh, I'm a king now and whatever. They don't have to do that gimmick, but they can. And you're not really into any kind of a weird thing like that with Mr. Money in the Bank because you're just carrying around a briefcase. You don't have to be like IRS at that point. And that is easier to lead to a championship than King of the Ring. King of the Ring did have the option of like people would challenge for the title, but then that was usually for the next pay-per-view, not something that could go down 5 months from now or something. So I do think that Money in the Bank kind of replaced that, and that might be why we don't see a whole lot of King of the Rings. We've got like the 2008, take a couple years off, 2010, take a couple years off, 2015, take a couple years off, because they're focused more on just, number one, having the Money in the Bank, number two, maybe Vince just doesn't like the King of the Ring gimmick and the tournaments in general. Number three, just other things going on. You know, what are you going to do with King of the Ring if you've got Brock Lesnar as your champion? Well, we don't want anybody to fight Brock Lesnar because we don't want Brock Lesnar to do anything. Okay, well then let's just have people have tag team matches and 6-man tag matches on Raw. And that's all they've done. But now they're bringing King of the Ring back, and we don't know where this is going to go. We don't know if this is going to be something that's a big deal, and this is going to be like, you know, Chad Gable wins, and this starts putting him into an actual upper mid-card spot. Maybe even further than that. Or this is the type of crowning achievement that makes Samoa Joe somebody who wins a world title next year. It could be a lot of different things.
I think because I've just got that nagging thing in my head that says Corbin, I do think it ends up being a big push for him. And I think we'll see him win a championship at some point, maybe on the SmackDown side of things.
I'm really looking forward to him feuding for the Universal Championship because we haven't seen that in the.
That's why I said SmackDown. That's why I was like, I think they'll move him over to the other show, and maybe he's the
and he can ruin our lives there instead.
Yeah, like he'll take it off of Kofi and just make everybody sad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where it's going, and I think that it's been well presented enough that at least in terms of the match quality and what's been happening so far, it's been a worthwhile venture. I just, at the moment, based on just previous storytelling and stuff along the lines that they've been doing over the last couple of months, I don't have a huge amount of faith that they're going to do anything with whoever wins it. But
I got a feeling based off of the 5 people that are left, if they give it to Elias, it's going to be absolutely pointless. King Elias is just going to be King Elias playing the guitar and doing the same thing.
Just be the King of Rock.
He'll just be Elvis. Yeah, like they're going to do an Elvis gimmick.
If they give it to Gable, I think that they're going to do that whole ADHD type thing again, where it's going to be like, well, we really want to push Chad Gable, and then by mid-November, he's nothing. Yeah. Unfortunately, I feel like that's the case. I think Gable's worth more than that, but I think that they really missed out on that 205 Live thing. Samoa Joe, I don't know. I mean, they seem to have a ceiling when it comes to Joe, and we all are fans of him. I think that we're all kind of in agreement that he deserves better. But maybe this is the way that they do that. Maybe not. And Ricochet, I don't think that if they give it to him that he's going to win some world title by the end of the year. But this could be a way to counterbalance how they never really gave him a solid United States title run. They gave him that title, and that belt's been hot potatoed around this year. And they needed to put it on AJ Styles. They felt the need to, at least, with the OC. So, I don't know, maybe that's their justification behind that. Maybe it's like, well, we could have King Ricochet, and maybe he can wear a little crown, and maybe he could do this, and maybe we can get some more gear out of it, and, you know, whatever. But King Baron Corbin is definitely a possibility.
I look at it out of the 5 guys, I think there's only real 2 possibilities, and they're both on the Raw side. They're Corbin and Joe. So if we end up going into next week's preview show and we're talking about Ricochet versus Chad Gable, I'm not going to have any clue on who could possibly benefit there.
I just think with the part of me hopes the Corbin thing would happen just for the sake of, I think if Corbin is to win King of the Ring, that's the reason why he's winning it, is to be King of the Ring and not be involved in anything else in the main event scene, or not be involved in the other title pictures, because he just goes around lauding himself as King of the Ring and that's it. Which I'd much prefer to what the alternatives are. But I don't know. I at the moment I think any one of the 5 could potentially win it.
At the very least, if Corbin wins, it gets him new ring gear.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that at the very least. Yeah,
you'd hope.
So I think that the last topic that we should do here is we should do kind of an impromptu Mount Rushmore. And I don't know 100% who my 4 would be, but I would put out there Owen Hart's definitely in for me.
Owen Hart for me.
Owen Hart's not in mine. So
well, we'll see how that goes then.
It's already like pretty much problematic. Anyway.
I mean, there could be an argument to it. Obviously, this is not going to be some like hour-long discussion. Everybody,
this isn't official. This isn't official. So.
Yeah, it's not 100% an official one. But looking at this list, I would say maybe my 4 would be Owen Hart, Randy Savage, Booker T, and that's tough. Harley Race.
Well, congratulations, because those are my 4. So I'm curious, who does Callum have that he bumped Owen Hart for?
Well, I think in my mind, there are 2 people that are over the top of Owen Hart. One is Bret Hart, because he won it twice. And he's the only 2-time winner.
And the other being Brock Lesnar?
Yeah, because he used it to catapult himself to win the WWE Championship.
That's fair.
So I just think that one was more meaningful than Owen Hart's one. But I can understand the reason why Owen Hart's one, because as a character, it worked out very well for him. And like at the time with the storyline that he was going with Bret Hart, it made the most sense in the world for him to win it. I just don't think that beyond that thing that happened at SummerSlam, even though he carried on with the King of Hearts moniker, it didn't actually mean anything beyond that point.
That's true.
Like from SummerSlam, does he come out wearing a crown ever again, or doing all the sort of lines? He's just Owen Hart.
He does have it in his ring gear.
Yeah, the logo and the ring gear are there.
Oh yeah, well I guess that's a nice touch.
Yeah, and that kind of gave him more credibility going forward, as you know, anytime that somebody wins the title or something, they could always be like, oh, Jinder Mahal, former WWE champion, like that kind of thing. They could always go back and be like, you know, former King of the Ring, Owen Hart. Like,
I will make
that gave him a boost.
Yeah, I will make the argument that obviously that Brock Lesnar didn't really do anything as a King of the Ring beyond just winning it and then challenging for the title and winning it. So it could have been just any tournament to battle him. So I could maybe eliminate him, but I just think the idea of Brett winning it twice, which is a feat that nobody else has ever accomplished, kind of puts him. It's the same way as like we have to include Austin if you're talking about the best Royal Rumble winners, because he's the only one that's won it 3 times, or something to that effect.
Is it interesting?
It's totally going to be a Mount Rushmore in the future.
Is it interesting that none of us said Austin, even though when you look at people whose careers were legitimately catapulted by winning King of the Ring, he's probably the number 1 guy?
Yeah, guys just justify it as being like, yeah, well, he wasn't really like a King of the Ring. It was almost just, if he would have cut that Austin 316 promo on another thing, it would have been maybe just as big.
Yeah, I think it's the moment itself. It's not like he used that and he was a great King of the Ring off the back of it. It's like that was the King of the Ring side of things is superfluous to him rising to the top. It opened an opportunity for him to win a lot of matches and then cut that promo at the end of it.
Yeah, they could have very easily had this, instead of being called the King of the Ring tournament, it could have been like the Milwaukee Cup or something stupid, where it wouldn't have really mattered, and then he would have cut that promo.
Whereas obviously you look at Harley Race and Macho King and King Booker, they lived the gimmick. And so they're people that you just look at and you can look at them, the way that they would dress and the way they styled themselves, and think, yeah, they're King of the Rings, Kings of the Ring.
And they work to represent the gimmick.
Yeah.
Too. Like you can tell that they won King of the Ring as opposed to just some tournament on Raw.
Yeah.
And obviously you could say the same thing about Sheamus and King Barrett. But those ones are like a negative version of it because it did nothing for their characters, and it did nothing for them in terms of developing them. In fact, the argument is that it probably regressed both of them.
Well, cool.
Well, we haven't decided. I guess you guys are pushing Owen Hart to be in it, and I'm pushing Brett's. But
well, I would actually, if I was going to push out one of your two, I would push out Brett, because Brett doesn't do anything with King of the Ring. He just so happens to utilize it as a way to say, I'm more of an Iron Man than Hulk Hogan, because he doesn't ever call himself the King. He just feuds with Jerry Lawler. So I would take Brock over Brett.
And I wouldn't take either. So I think that we kind of have that.
Well, I think if you're going for the unified Smark out moment, King of the Ring, then Owen Hart takes precedence because you guys want him over it, and then we just add the three that we all agree. Yeah, and we add the three that we all agree on.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put it down. You know what? Fuck it. It's an official one. Let's just say it, because really, are we gonna have any more of a discussion in the future and do this all over again?
I don't know. I think we can totally break down Mabel for another 2 hours.
I was gonna say, can we do like a really short worst King of the Rings?
Sure, yeah.
Mabel, Ken Shamrock, Billy Gunn, and Sheamus.
See, I would say, I would maybe put King Barrett on there.
I'd put King Barrett on there, and I'd put both Billy Gunn and Mabel on there. But then I'd probably also put Tito Santana, because like, if you were to do like a Sporkle quiz of King of the Ring winners, Tito Santana's the last person that you're going to come up with.
Yeah, it might be hard to think of Morocco, but you might go, first King of the Ring, okay. Yeah. I think you got to put Mabel, you got to put Billy Gunn. I'd vote for Barrett, and that fourth one is tough, but maybe Santana, because he does get just completely lost in the shuffle at the same time as Macho King, who at that point didn't even need to win King of the Ring again to be able to do that. So it's almost like he didn't even do it. Yeah, you know what? I'd go with that. I'd go Barrett, Gunn, Mabel, and Santana.
I could see Santana. I wouldn't put Barrett on there, but I guess we're doing the 2 out of 3.
Who would you put instead?
I'd put Shamrock, because it's just so insignificant.
I think the Shamrock one at least got a positive reaction for a while. And at least it was like a babyface winning it, so at least for that night it got a positive reaction. Whereas in Barrett's case, he didn't even get that positive reaction because he was a heel, and so he took that positive reaction away from people.
If I were to put Shamrock on the list, I think I'd put him on there with Barrett. Like those two could be the argument. I think we're all in agreement. Billy Gunn and Mabel have to be in there.
Oh yeah,
Billy Gunn and Mabel are totally on there.
Yeah.
Santana, yeah, and
yeah.
If you guys are
Barrett
saying Barrett, I can see Wade Barrett, because I think it lessened his career. It didn't do anything to Shamrock, but I think it brought Wade Barrett down a notch.
Look at that. We did two Mount Rushmores in the
Mount
middle of
and wrestling
in the middle of that.
There's your content.
You got three different main events this week. All right, now top rope list. No, I'm just kidding. So that's it for, I think, King of the Ring discussion. I don't know if we can really break down anything else. If we missed something, drop a comment below and we'll try to chime in with some kind of comment response or something. But we don't know what's happening with the next set of King of the Ring. We don't know if they're going to do one in 2020. There's lots of different options that they could do. And if that comes down to it, then next year we'll talk about King of the Ring with the 2020 set. And obviously we will talk about the winner of the King of the Ring when it comes down to Clash of Champions. So stay tuned for that. That's happening next week. So we will do our predictions and we will do the post show once we get to next Wednesday and so on and so forth. I did all my plugs for the most part. So I'm just going to pass this around. Rob?
All right, and I hope you all enjoyed our final non-pay-per-view based event for the year, because It seems like there's a pay-per-view every other month. And for me, I'll be covering these pay-per-views on eWrestling News, Fightful.com, and on the WrestleZone Daily, in addition to my work with Smark Moments. So check out all those websites and check out 2001 Wrestling Odyssey. But to tell you more about that, once again, here's Callum Wiggins.
So 2001 Wrestling Odyssey, our retro podcast, where me and Rob go back in time to the year 2001, check out all the news events that took place in that point in time. It was a big year for professional wrestling, almost as big as 2019, maybe even bigger. But yeah, so you can check out all the monthly episodes we have on those ones. The September one will be coming out sometime in later September. Not now, sometime later in September. And other stuff you can check out all the weekly articles on smarkoutmoment.com, including the power rankings, which is the one that I contribute, and follow me on Twitter at Wigmeister14.
Alrighty, everybody, that's going to do us in for this edition. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all your support, whether it was a like or a comment or something with Patreon or the merchandise stuff or just watching the episode. We are out for the week. There is no more stuff that we have planned necessarily, but we might be popping up for something else. I don't know. If that's the case, then if you are subscribed, you will be alerted of whenever anything gets posted, and that goes along with the other stuff that's happening on smarkoutmoment.com. So follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and just subscribe and do all that kind of stuff. But next week, we will be breaking down the Clash of Champions stuff, as I said. We will do the hot tags before that. In the meantime, have a nice weekend. We will see you when we see you. This has been another Smark Out Moment, and we're being counted out.